When you put your heart and soul into creating something, you want it to make an impact, to endure, to express something. What does it take to get there? I'm Questlove, and this is Quest for Craft, my collaboration with the makers of the Balvenie single malt Scotch whiskey. A deep dive into the obsessive, never-ending, whatever-it-takes journey to create something extraordinary. Conventional wisdom says that mastering a craft is a matter of learning and honing your skills. But is that enough? In my experience, putting in the hours is just the first step. The special sauce comes when you put your own personal stamp on something. I sat with my good friend, Mark Ronson, DJ, songwriter, and producer. Mark found his own voice as he helped others, from Amy Winehouse to Lady Gaga to Bruno Mars, express theirs. In this episode, Mark and I talk about the relationship between craft and expression.
Of course, I'd heard of Electric Lady, and I'm going to say this because you're not going to toot your own horn, but also if you're listening. The reason that you guys all came here is because of Stevie, but the reason that everybody has come here since 2000 basically is because you guys made voodoo here. So I think there's like
Whatever that is.
You're definitely as linked into the folklore, but
Could you tell me the first thing you imitated to create something?
my stepfather, Mick Jones, is in the band Foreigner.
Yeah.
You know, really successful and very talented, awesome producer, musician, songwriter. He was the chief songwriter, so he had a recording studio at home in our apartment. And he had this mammoth piece of equipment that was like the most high-end thing of the time called a synclavier. It was, you know, this big with 1,000 buttons on it. And I'm sure it was taller than I was at the time. And he definitely would show me a little bit how to use stuff. So he would go out, and I learned just enough to recreate Terence Trent D'Arby's Wishing Well, which is my favorite song at the time, like completely
Really?
from scratch. Like a very rote, bad karaoke version of it. But the whole thing that started with the jump, boom, cha, gat, doom, boom. That, like, of course, you know, a very iconic hi-hat pattern.
Right.
And then the boom, 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 boom. I found all the sounds because the synclavier probably was used in some of the high-end 80s production. So there probably were some presets. So you're like, oh, even to my 11-year-old ear. And my mother's is here right now. They would have some pretty wild. They would entertain a lot.
Yes, high-end people.
And
Big wigs.
Yeah. And there were people would come over, and I guess if I could get anyone's attention for like 3 seconds, I'd be like, want to come in the studio, in the music room, and I listen to what I made, and I'd be like, Dick, and it would like play, and people would be like, yeah, kid, it's Wishing Well, like, you know. For me, I was like, but I made it. But it was like that. This through line from that to like making an entire record of covers, and not even realizing that like that was always my fascination of like taking songs that I loved and like getting under the hood without maybe thinking about it that analytically, like learning in the same way that someone in the Guitar Center is playing Stairway. Like, it's so magic because like you are that song for that moment.
I always thought that the best way to be a beat maker was to practice, you know, like practice beats. Like if you were a jazz guy, if you were a saxophone player, you probably go to Giant Steps or Love Supreme or whatever. But for you, who was like your North Star in terms of like...
Well, when I got my sampler, I just wanted to be Premier. And when I was in my high school band, God knows what this combination of Living Colour and the Black Crows, if you can imagine what that sounds like in your mind. I was just so enamored with my heroes, and probably like didn't have the confidence to think that what I really, something that might be inside me that might be original might be worth saying as well, I think.
When do you feel was the exact moment that you arrived? Because the way that Back to Black just paralyzed us, it was like, wait, Mark Ronson produced it? That Mark Ronson? And literally, I called Jazzy Jeff.
Right.
And we were like, that Mark Ronson? And then we just kept...
That little shit?
Yo, but it was just like... But it was such a gob-stopping moment, and like I wish you could have seen the domino effect of everyone that we like three-way, and that's such a weird thing, like three-way call.
I know, yeah.
At what point did you feel comfortable in transforming from Mark Ronson, the DJ, to like, I'm gonna own this, and damn it, I'm a producer?
You know, when the Nika record had come out, there was this big groundswell around it, and she was in this Hilfiger commercial, and it was on MTV, and I had Busta Rhymes and Jay-Z and people coming up to me in the club who really only knew me as a DJ. And
Right.
Busta Rhymes, I remember, came up and was like, "You did that bum, 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 bum," joint.
Right.
And I was like, yeah. He was like, that's, like, I couldn't believe it. Yeah, like
Right.
people that I really, and there were little moments, even though that record, it wasn't a massive commercial success, even though Nika was so insanely talented. So, yeah, there was a 4-year lull, like, between that. And I did probably think that it wasn't gonna happen. So when the Amy stuff blew up, it was a really wonderful thing, but I think that I had been so programmed to think it might not happen. Like, I was just sort of relieved, and then just like, don't believe the hype must have been tattooed like 17 times all over my body. I was like, okay, this is nice, they enjoy this now. Who knows what this means?
It takes years to hone your craft well enough to find expression in your art, but craft without expression can feel meaningless. Kris Bowers, a jazz pianist turned award-winning film composer, has scored everything from Bridgerton to King Richard to, you guessed it, Quest for Craft. His insight on the relationship between craft and expression is as personal as it is profound.
I played piano from the time I was about 4 years old. As soon as I started to learn how to improvise and compose and learn how to express where I was emotionally in any moment, I fell in love with the instrument. I realized I could be angry or sad and didn't really have spaces to express that verbally. But then I can go to the piano and like play something from this like angry headspace, and then all of a sudden I wasn't as angry anymore. And so once I realized I can kind of move through emotions with this instrument, it really became this vehicle for expression. I had a teacher, this amazing jazz pianist named Gerald Clayton. He encouraged me to sing while I'm playing. Basically said that if you sing everything that you play, you'll have no choice but to play what's coming out of you. That was a huge shift for me, where all of a sudden anything I was playing was so connected to my literal voice that it became true improvisation as opposed to me just playing something that I thought of playing. The reason why I love film composing is because I really love diving deep into the human experience through emotion, and music just happens to be the way that I feel most comfortable doing that. Realizing that I could listen to the score from these movies and feel the same emotional journey that I did in the theater, I immediately decided that's what I want to do. Thinking about a movie like King Richard and writing about like my own relationship with my father, or like how do these personal experiences make me feel and connect me to an immediate emotion in a way where I can express that a bit clearer. One of the reasons why I approach things that way is actually a conversation I had with Kobe Bryant when I worked on his documentary Muse. And the first thing that he told me, he was like, this documentary is obviously about my life and about things that have happened to me, but I want you to, for each scene that you're scoring, think about what does this remind you of in your own life, and can you tap into that emotion that you have about your experience and write music from that place. And if you write music from that place, then it'll be great. And I honestly think that was the first time anybody told me that in a way that really transformed the way that I approached scoring and tapping into my own personal emotions to pull from as a composer. I think really stemmed from that conversation in a lot of ways.
When you start a collaboration, before you get with a client, either Bruno or Amy or Gaga or whomever you're working with, what is the preliminary period like the past casting couch phase?
Yeah, it's so different. So in a really weird way, like all of those people that you mentioned, there was one time where we sat down for 10 minutes, and I'm sure we were both reading each other, but I could just tell, like, I can do something good with this person. You know, even somebody like Bruno, who I love the B.O.B. song, Nothing on You, but like I wasn't that familiar with his other stuff, and I was just like, yeah, sure, I'll go meet this guy. And we sat, and he just said some incredibly smart shit. He's like, whatever we make, it has to sound nothing like anybody expects a Mark Ronson, Bruno Mars collaboration to make. No 60s suits and James Brown shit. And I was like, I'm in. Like, it was obviously so intelligent. And then, yeah, Amy was a conversation 5 minutes, probably very little even talking about music, you know? So I always, like, usually have just a sense of if we can get on. And then past that point, like, first day in the studio, I'm just trying to figure out what they need.
Is it better for you to find that artist's voice?
Right.
Or are you a provocateur? Do you take them out of their comfort zone?
Yeah. I only take them out of their comfort zone if I really feel like there's a place that they can go that I know that they can get to, but they might be afraid to go, or they don't see it yet.
Can you give an example of an artist or a song you worked on in which you went heavy on, look, let's try it this way and see what happens, and you were right?
I can definitely think of ones where I've been wrong, like in a good way. Like when
Well, give us an example.
the artist is like Uptown Funk.
Okay.
It had taken us 7 months. We had kind of hit a wall. The first time we got together, we had written this. We'd written the song. We had the first verse, and we were all just so psyched. You know what it's like when you leave the studio and you listen to a 45-second demo like 80 times on the way home.
Right.
It felt so good, and it was literally just a drum beat. Bruno playing drums and the first verse, and then every time we tried to add to it, it never had the same spirit of the first demo. It felt forced, and the song was starting to just really hit this wall. And we'd probably be, over the course of 4 months, got back in the studio in and out a few times. And Bruno sent the demo from tour. He was on the road and going back into a little studio backstage every night where the band's just going out and partying and having the time of their life. So, like, all credit to him. And he sent back this version of the song that was like, I really think this is it. And it was like, bow, 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 bow. I mean, with Jeff were like, are you kidding? Like, we've been doing these crazy, like, George Clinton, like, neutron fuzz wah bass lines. Like, this song was going so far off the electric spanking of War Baby's edge. Like, it really was going into another zone. And we were like, no, this is, like, the wrong thing. And Bruno was, like, very much like, this is kind of the way the song's gonna be, or it's over. And we're like, okay, so we listened to it from And then from there, where we built it to, and we loved it, and he was totally right, because the song never had a chorus, because we were like adamant. It's a funk song, like Hollywood Swinging. It shouldn't have a chorus. It shouldn't be sung, because then it's a disco song. And the only way to get away with making a pop song that had no chorus was to have like a really solid hook that went through the whole thing. And Bruno and Phil really came up with something with that, do-do-do. But at first, me and Jeff were just like, no way, man, this song's over. This is some corny shit.
So how do you know what to take away from something to make it perfect?
I think,
to not overcook it?
Yeah, when I started, I think that I was just so, you know, I had that like youthful, like, I want to impress everybody. You're stacking things because and maybe you just got in a nice studio. It's the first time you've ever seen this old octagon or a funny machine. You just want to put everything on everything.
Right.
And then I think just from being around other really great producers and people like Bruno and Jeff Basker, who like very what's serving the melody, what's serving the song. And I think that doesn't necessarily work for everything, because like I love weird Mahavishnu orchestra records, and I love them because they're eclectic and avant-garde. But I think now I'm just like, I don't know if it's what happens to you when you just get like old or something, but like I want honesty, and I want to hear the voice. I want to hear the most important thing that's going on in the song, and then I want everything else to be harmonically and rhythmically supporting that.
Has there been an example of like you having an obscure sample source that turned into a song? Like, do ideas come from odd sources? Do you have any stories of?
Yeah, I mean, some of these things, I don't even know where they come from. Like, sometimes it's just walking down, so the rain, the way it falls on a weird subway grate can make a pattern, and I just kind of sing it into my phone, and some of those things come, and you're just so lucky to receive those. You know, I feel like I'm just always walking around with like an antenna that's just always slightly open to, because you never know when you're gonna pick something up.
How do you notate an idea?
I just sing it into the phone, and then my pitch is just so bad that I have to hear it the next day and remember and be like, what is the key of this? Like, I can't even, or...
One of the best ideas I ever had on a project for, hopefully, the next Roots record, happened to be on all right, so the last 3 days of the month are always moving day for people in my apartment building, which means that elevator service is going to be slow and only 2 are working. And the idea came to me right as I was getting on the elevator, and there was 9 people in the elevator already. And it's one of those ideas in which I know that if I don't get this out in 40 seconds,
Yes.
if I don't get a place of privacy,
Yeah.
are you that person that just has no shame? It's I have to notate this, or you have to
I'm just on the plane,
right.
into the window. Which is now acting...
Or act like you're on the phone. Can a group of craftspeople find a way to express themselves with a whiskey brand that started in the 1800s? In the case of the Balvenie, the answer is yes, but only because of their insistence on practicing all the crafts of whiskey in-house and on-site. By farming and malting their own barley, smithing their own copper stills, and tending to their own barrels, they are in a unique position to do things their own way. Case in point, Balvenie Caribbean Cask, which is made by taking whiskey aged 14 years and then finishing it for a few extra months in casks that have held Caribbean rum. Most folks would simply acquire a cask from a rum distillery, but the Balvenie malt master David Stewart did it a different way. He came up with his own blend of Caribbean rums, aged them in his own warehouses, and then emptied the rum and filled the cask with 14-year-old single malt. This added considerable time and complication to the process, but the result was worth it. It's a whiskey that is acclaimed by whiskey lovers because there's something indefinably different about it. That's what expression is all about. So my final question is, what lessons could you give to creatives? And this is not just musicians. What advice could you give them that, that you've learned, or at least it took you a long time for yourself to learn?
I think when I look back at all the things that I've done, even the things that have flopped, if there was a moment in that record, an album or a song that I know that we were all striving for something and maybe we didn't hit it because we just weren't quite talented enough, or maybe it just came out the wrong week. But I can listen to that thing and I know if you came in the studio or Danger Mouse or someone, I could still hit play and be proud of it. That's very different than the records that I've made where I can tell I was chasing something that wasn't 100% genuine. Things that I did because I was maybe, even though I wasn't being honest with myself at the time, was trying to make a hit or trying to cash in on a thing, or someone had been like, hey, we need another Uptown Funk type record for the Ghostbusters soundtrack. And I'd be like, yeah. And so, after I had my first initial success with Amy too, I really milked that sound and overdid it because I think I was so much wait, I've finally done something of note, so this must be all that they want from me, so I'm going to do this as long as possible.
So you were going to stay in Phil Spector 60s land for as long as you could?
Just keeping all the trumpet players in New York in employ. No, I remember being really, really nervous to play Amy my album that I did after her. It was this record collection. It was kind of weird, and it had synths and stuff on it.
Right.
If you were playing it for her and she didn't like it, she would just start to turn it down while you were just she didn't mince words. But the one song on there that I liked the most, and I was actually singing on it, that was her favorite because she could tell that was the most real to me. It was the same thing with, weirdly, on the album version I had before, her favorite one was the one with Santi Gold. It wasn't one that sounded soulful or jazzy. It was just one that was kind of cool, and it just sounded like the one that I liked the most. She just had this way, and so now I just want anybody to listen to something I did and be able to tell he really loved, that's him, that song, and obviously a collaboration is a part of everybody's input, but I feel the ones that I genuinely love it and there's something I love, they're not always going to hit, and some of them might flop, but they're the ones you could stand behind for the rest of time.
Thank you, man, for talking to us.
Of course.
Mark Ronson, ladies and gentlemen, thank you. It's a well-known fact that my favorite show of all time is Soul Train. My favorite Soul Train moments aren't when the artists are masterful, but when they're indelible, when they made their mark in a way that remains with me even decades later. Perfecting your craft takes time. Finding your own voice and putting it out there takes guts. My advice to creatives is not just to master your craft, but to find a way to make it your own. Sometimes it may be scary, but it's worth it.